everybody. Welcome to our podcast, The Old College Try. I'm Peg Keough, and I'm joined by our special guest, Mark Hernandez. This is my second conversation with Mark, so definitely check out our first recording where we talked about Mark's high school years, how he landed at Stanford as an undergraduate, and his experience at Stanford. Today, we'll be gaining Mark's insights about how to look at the college admission process and tips and tricks to be successful getting into colleges. Stick around, you won't want to miss this. I keep lying to myself. Okay, Mark.
Yes.
We've discussed your origin story, your time in high school, Stanford, talked about selective schools. So now let's dive into you as a high school teacher of English that you did post school for 25 years. So you graduated and went right into teaching from.
Yeah. And it was sort of by accident, because the plan was to go to law school. And I was just going to teach for a year. I coached high school swimming at Gunn High School, and they offered me a long-term sub gig for a semester. And I was like, great, sure, why not? And so I taught for a semester, and then I just fell in love with it. And I kept on teaching and kept on teaching and kept on teaching. And then I'll say, when I got to be 30 years old, I said, okay, well, hold on a second. Now I've been teaching for 7 years, and the plan was to go to law school. Now or never. And so I decided to apply to law school. And I will tell you, Peg, like during the application process, I sort of fell back in love with teaching. And it basically came down to, well, if I get into Stanford Law, I'll go to Stanford Law. If I don't get into Stanford Law, I'm going to be staying as a teacher. And so, well, again, I got into Stanford Law. And so I was able to, I went there. And then I was also able to teach part-time while I was going there. So I was able to teach part-time while I was in law school. And then after law school, I decided to come back teaching.
See, I didn't even know that part from when we talked originally. Yeah. So I went to law school and decided, that's awesome. Decided to go back to teaching. That was what you really wanted to do. So talk a little, because you were at one high school the whole time, right? So just tee up, what type of high school were you at?
Yeah. So I was, again, is maybe obvious by my teaching part-time while I went to law school. It was Gunn High School, and it was it's the shadow of Stanford, right? It is a walk, nice 20-minute walk away from Stanford campus. And so, Gunn is a very high achieving school, and many people there have very big ambitions as to where they want to go to college. And it is an excellent, excellent, excellent school, and very high standards, and again, very high expectations for where people want to go to school.
Yeah, yeah. So how would you were an English teacher, you weren't in the college advising office, but how do you think kids, because I know our listeners, they're all, they might have kids just starting this, and it's overwhelming. How do we approach this? What's a good way to do it? How do you think the kids there typically did it? How do you think the parents, because I'm sure you interacted with parents at different times. Like what were your observations of how people went through this process? And then, we'll get into maybe your tips and tricks about maybe some mistakes people made and better ways to do it. And that.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people in Palo Alto, went to and worked with private advisors and private counselors. I will say, for as far as the school counselors go, the school counselors are just angels of the school system. They are wild. Everyone in a public school system is wildly overworked, but among the wildly overworked, the high school counselors are extremely wildly overworked. I whenever a counselor came to me for a favor or anything, it is automatic yes, because they work extremely hard and they're inundated. I used to say I can never imagine waking up and checking their inbox. I could only, I would shudder.
Yeah, I remember my kids went to big public school, and when we got into the college thing, it was just clear, like, this isn't their job to sit down with my child and say, oh, you want to look all over the country? They had like 500 kids on their docket, between all the grades. So yeah.
Exactly. The math doesn't work there, right? 500 kids, like, when would you meet them all? Right? It's just like, not meet them all, but like, for how long would you have a chance to work with them? Right? Totally.
And it depends, some schools, some private schools, when I used to live outside of Seattle, they were paying a lot of money, and so they did have a college advising department, and they were assigned a person, but there was I don't know how big your school was that you taught at, but they was way smaller, you know? So it
Yes.
really depends on the high school.
It does, and I wanna say this with no shade towards anyone in particular, and I say this with assuming best intentions. The only trick is for those smaller schools with, with private, college counselors and such, is that sometimes the smaller schools, the counselors there, like, the advisors, like, they don't give the best advice either. Now, not at least that's me getting secondhand from students I worked with. Is hearing like they've gotten a lot of bad advice from the small school advisors. Anyway, I'm sure it doesn't apply to anyone who's listening here. I'm sure they're wonderful, but just be very careful there.
Yeah, I mean, I think as you move through this process in general, just like everything, you've gotta critically think
Yeah,
about, yeah, I mean, I think it's not because I think I know what you're referencing, and I've seen it, but been involved with a lot of private schools where the counseling is just amazing.
yeah,
There are a few schools out there where the counseling revolves around get into the Stanfords of the world
yep,
because then we could say this many kids went to Stanford.
yep,
And I have no idea how many schools that is. Just as a parent, you just want to be aware of that and make
yeah,
sure again your child is you've got a good balanced list that who's ever guiding, and in my case it was my husband and I, we didn't even hire anybody, but make sure you're choosing the schools for the right reason for your
yep,
child, that
yep,
it's going to be a place where they can thrive
yep,
basically.
yep,
So, and maybe you didn't have a lot of interaction because I always tell people you literally are shopping for college. You are
yeah,
purchasing a product, right? And I try
yes,
and get people to think that way. So it's not this crazy gift they're getting that they have to move heaven and earth to make happen or something. But how did you had a very unique population there
yeah,
because you're right on top of Stanford, and a
yeah,
lot of people from what you're describing sound like that's their motivation
yeah.
to go to one of these highly selective, some of my colleagues call them highly rejective
That's funny.
schools,
I
right?
like that a lot. I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. But how do you have any experience around like the buying part? Like how did these people prep themselves at all around the financial piece of it?
Yeah, so that was very often a bridge that people didn't cross, at least I saw, beforehand. Like as I said earlier, the we'll figure it out is not a plan. But I
Nope.
did see a lot of people going in with we'll figure it out. Right. I definitely saw some people that, were heck bent on getting into an elite institution and would figure out the finances later. Um
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll say again, if there was evidence of, uh, planning financially, like, I didn't see a ton of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm not saying that that can be extrapolated to the whole population,
Yeah,
but the we'll just figure it out, especially around some of these colleges is pretty common. So when
yeah,
we were chatting the other day, you mentioned something that I think is really good to get into, that you would a lot of kids would, and you use the term, the kids would think they could get in. Well, I can get in. I can get in. So
yeah,
could you dig into that, like what you meant by that? You saw it.
yeah,
Not that you have stats that you can give me, but you saw kids come into school and say, "I didn't get in. I did get it," all that kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah. So 2 things there. First, Peg, and my experience is that in general, it was a lot easier to make reliable predictions on admissions 20 years ago. I would have students where I knew where they were applying, and I would be able to think to myself, "Okay, they're getting in, or they're getting here, or they're getting there," and then would find out and be like, "Yeah, I was right." That would became way less the case in the past 10 years. It is, in my view, it is harder to predict where people are gonna get in than ever has been. That's my opinion. I will
Mhm.
also say, to the other point, that as far as people thinking they're gonna get in and being far more confident than they probably should be, I think people sometimes, and bless them. Listen, Peg, I'm sure you get this. Like the reality is that every kid is special, right? Every kid is wonderful, and it's also the case that when you get 70,000 wonderful people applying to one place that allows 1,500, many wonderful and special people aren't going to get in.
Yeah.
And I think where I saw people, and I still see people struggle with this, is in not really understanding that math. They think, "Oh, I've got a 4.2 and I did this robotics competition and I have this AP score and this SAT score." And it's like, correct. And that's wonderful. And you should be proud of that. And there are also at least 1,500 people that could say the same thing, you know?
Yeah.
So I do think where people get in trouble is thinking that certain stats will definitely get them in, and they won't.
Yeah, yeah, because I really think that some of these schools, when they say it's holistic, it truly is. I look at myself applying way back when, right? And my parents
Yeah.
wouldn't even take me to Cornell. They're like, you're not going to get in. And this was literally, they said that to me. Nowadays, what parent would say that? I'd be crushed. And I was like, I get it. Okay. And it was a
Yeah.
4-hour drive to take me. And they still were like,
Long
no.
way. Long
And then I got in. But then as I learned more and more about how I'm like, I get why I got in. Like, I had a great GPA. We didn't even have APs. It was called honors, and I didn't take all of them. And my SATs were abysmal by today's standards.
Yeah.
Like, I told my husband years ago, and he was like, God, you got that on one of your Englishes? Because he's like you, he's a writer and
Yeah.
MFA in creative writing
Yeah.
and all this. He was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh. But I was the package. Like, I was a huge leader. I was an athlete. I was a leader in this.
Right.
And
Right.
what I wanted to study, I had taken tons of initiative. And so they looked at me and were like, this kid's a go-getter and not
Right.
dumb, not,
Right.
not stats wise where some of these other kids are. And so they accepted me. Right. So I think that is still the case. It's just that when we were kids weren't purposefully doing research to say they
Yeah.
did this research and hiring a company to do it. So there's much more choreographing is how I
Yeah.
like to say it
That's well
of
said.
these, which I think is terrible. Honestly, let these kids be kids and let them love what they love and pursue it in the amount and veracity that they want to
Yeah.
pursue it instead
Yeah.
of kind of making them be something. To your point, then they apply and there's 70,000 apps for 1,500 spots and they don't get in. And it's like, so I did all that stuff and I still didn't get in because the odds are completely,
Yeah.
not in their favor. And I would
Yeah.
also argue if you're choreographing to get in somewhere, that's probably not the best fit where you're going to thrive either.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
But I would think too, this thinking you're going to get in, and correct me, you tell me if you don't agree with this, it might come through on an application if there's overconfidence in an essay or something,
Yeah.
potentially, I would think would be a turnoff for people that are reading the apps, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you, Peg. And I will tell you, so it was on campus, it was no secret that I was, Stanford undergrad, Stanford law. And so I definitely had a lot of people come to me for essay help, application help, and such.
Yeah.
For many years, Peg, it was sort of this. It's probably an exaggeration to say a parade during lunch, but I definitely helped a lot of kids during lunch with their essays, and then I definitely spent a lot of nights reading essays for kids. And as to your point about the arrogance, not arrogance, but like the confidence coming through in essay topics, the easiest indicator there would be I would read tons of essays that were about just achievements, right? They're all about like, oh yeah, and then I won this again. We happen to be, we won first place in this robotics competition, or oh yeah, and I happen to get this achievement on my Model UN or whatever it was. But
Mhm.
generally, yeah, essays about achievements and such were code for I should get in because of what I've done already. You know,
Yeah. 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 Well, and from again, I don't do this stuff, but they can see that elsewhere in the application, and the essay is where you're supposed to be showing them, something else.
hundred
So,
percent.
as far as these kind of schools, what kind of misconceptions or slash urban myths do you think people, like it could be students or parents, have around this besides the idea of, I have a 5.0 and
Yeah.
perfect SATs, I'm good, that kind of thing.
I think the other thing people forget, or maybe not, and it speaks to your ethos, your mission. I think, and maybe not in the case for your listeners, but I think a lot of families and students are going to be shocked by how much financial aid they get. I really think that I think part of this is, and you said it earlier, like colleges are a product. And I think the sooner, and again, your listeners, I'm sure, do this well. But the sooner you realize that colleges are businesses,
Yeah.
the better off you're gonna be, because too many students that I work with or see, they think, "Oh, this is great, ivory tower of learning and goodness and nobility," and fair enough, and it's a business,
Yep.
and they have bottom lines to watch out for, and just understand that again, this gets back to the math here. They're gonna offer you some financial aid, and you can say no if you want, because they'll find somebody who will take it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
they
Well,
use
and
price pretty specifically, right?
yeah, and we say this all the time, and we even reference you've got to know all these schools' business plans. They're
Yes,
nonprofits, but and it's not there's nothing bad about it. You just have to know the world, the sandbox you're playing in,
yes.
basically. And that's why College Aid Pro exists, to be
Yeah,
honest. And
yeah,
as we always tell, if you're wondering, how do I know what you guys are talking about? Set up your free account at mycap.collegeaidpro.com, put in your stats, put in your child stats. We'll project merit. We'll give you an idea at Stanford to what Mark's just saying here. Like Stanford is extremely generous with
yeah,
need-based aid. They meet 100% of need. You might not have any need, in which case they don't give merit scholarships.
yeah,
They just don't. That's part of their business plan. So you're
yeah,
paying full price, you're going to have to go find private scholarship. But if you're a family that makes a decent living, and when I say that, I mean into six figures, you will most likely, unless you're sitting on $10 million in inheritance, you're probably going to get some nice money from
yeah,
Stanford, whereas another school might give your child 30,000 in
yeah,
merit a year, but not much in the need base. And there's no way you can research all this and know
yeah,
it. I'm just
yeah,
saying, I'm
yeah,
not saying this to you, Mark. I'm saying
yeah,
it to
yeah,
our
yeah, yeah,
listeners. So,
yeah,
you know, do the work to figure this out because you will be saving yourself as a parent so much stress and as a couple if you're married and also just the relationship with your child. They're teenagers. It's hard enough. Don't add more stress of, well, we said we're going to figure it out and oh wow, it's $85,000. One of
right,
my colleagues at CAP just put something on LinkedIn about that, family, and it's an $85,000 delta at Northeastern. And it's like, what? That
right,
can all you can't know exactly what a college is going to give you. And if anybody out there tells you, run because they're not above board, but you can definitely get educated and have a good idea, understand how that college functions. And so, set up your account, at least start understanding this, and you'll be way ahead of the game. And then the college isn't 100% in the driver's seat, which they are most of the time. And
yeah,
these schools like Stanford, my college as well, Cornell, I mean, they know this. They know, especially the Cornells and Stanfords of the world, that the parents are just and the kids are just salivating to get there. So it's like you might make some decisions that on paper, I'm a financial planner by background, aren't the best decisions. That's your call to make. There's no judgment here,
yep,
but do it with your eyes wide open. Don't do it under duress April 10th when you
right,
get that financial aid award letter. That's the key. I've had clients through the years. I had my own business before joining CAP, and they said, Peg, we get it. This is the most expensive school. We understand, but we're doing it for XYZ reasons. I'm like, I did my job. I'm going to
yep,
sleep well
yep,
at night. I wouldn't necessarily make that decision for my child, but you're doing it with your eyes wide open. And that's the key thing. And we have this debt crisis and it's like so much of this is avoidable. And that's what's
yeah,
so frustrating to me as a professional because they talk about loan forgiveness and all this. And I'm all for that in certain areas, but I'm all for don't have the debt that you
right,
then think you're entitled for forgiveness. So,
right.
anyways, I'm going off on a bit and on a bit of a
No, rock
tirade
and
here,
roll.
but it's just really it bugs me, and I see it more with the Stanfords and the Cornells of the world because people think that's the golden ticket and we've
Yeah,
got to move heaven and earth. And that might be the case for certain kids, but maybe not. But to what you said originally, which started all this, is like Stanford is very generous with certain
yeah,
types of families. So
yeah,
you should never look at that sticker price, that cost of attendance, which for some of these schools, it's over $100,000 a year, which is just insane. But
totally
you don't
wild,
look
yeah,
at It's insane. You don't look at that and make a decision based on that because most all these colleges have in their business plan that they discount. It's just a matter of how they discount and if
Yeah.
they're going to discount for your family. And I had twins. My daughter would get different discounts than my son at the same exact school. So it's very involved. And
Yeah.
so, a lot of people don't do their own taxes because it's too involved. So get some help. And that's why we love saying we have a free account you can get. Are we a for profit? Of course. I'm not going to hide that. And there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah.
at the very least, set up your free account
Yeah.
and just start to get in the know. If Stanford's on the list and you're listening to this and you want to hear Mark, put it in there. You can put in 3 schools. See what it says for your family. It might be awesome. Might be really nice to get discounts. It might be under your budget, right? It
Right.
might be something great like that. So, just keep that in mind. Anything else that you want to share with the listeners, like as far as kind of traps that people fall in or any sort of misconceptions that you've seen, cause stress with a family when they're working through this?
Yeah. So I'm not sure this causes stress until the very end, but you mentioned traps, and you also mentioned it. Something you mentioned. Anytime anybody guarantees you, and in this space, anytime anybody guarantees you anything, I'd be very careful. I just say run. Right?
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
my space, I have a lot of people that will say, "Oh, we guarantee you'll get into this school or that school." I wouldn't talk to them at all, right? I'd be very, and again, sounds good. Good for them. Good for marketing and such. Good for them. But that's just disingenuous. And I don't know of anyone, again, apart from like, I mean, there are maybe a few cases, I guess, like a few singular cases of being able to guarantee admission. And if you're working with someone that say, "Oh, great, work with us because we guarantee you'll get in here, here, here," I wouldn't work with them at all.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would really if you look for outside counselors, just really find out what makes that person tick and what they're
Yeah.
trying to do for your child.
Yep.
I know tons of independent education counselors, and the ones that I know and really respect, they look at that kid, they get to know that kid,
Yep.
and they know schools all over the country, and they start making suggestions based on that. It's not just based on name recognition and rankings
Yeah.
because that really can end up not being great fits for kids. When I went
Yeah.
to Cornell, it was I mean, this is gonna so date me, but, you used to have to go to the library to do required reading, right? And you
Right.
literally went, Mark, to the thing, and you got this thing, and you went to your class, and you read it, and then you gave it back, and that's how you some of the readings you had to do depending on the professors. Well, some kids would, like, rip those out, right? Because then it's like, now all these kids I'm competing against in my class don't have I mean, granted, it would be found out and the prof would produce it again, so not the
That's
best
amazing.
thinking, but that
I
was
love
just
it.
kind of like, that happened to me once, and I'm like, "Really, guys? Really?" Like, I was just the
I love
opposite
it.
kind of person. Like I said, I was just kind of one of those, no one thought I would get in kinda kids, and
Yeah.
I just showed up and I graduated with a B. I mean, I graduated. It wasn't like I
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah.
couldn't graduate Cornell. But, yeah, so there and kids nowadays, you know this better than I do, but they have not as many happy-go-lucky kids graduate from high school anymore, and it's
Yeah.
really sad to me because
Yeah.
let your kids be their kids. Like, they shouldn't have adult level stress in high school, in my opinion. Things happen, people have divorces, and things happen in life, and they might get hit, a young person with a death or something early and they just have to learn how to deal with it. But so much of the stress that's out there, even saw it when my kids were in high school, is just insane. And then you graduate high school and you move on to another place that's pretty intense, but it's a higher level, which it should
Yeah.
be at every college because you're
Yeah.
paying, it should be harder than high school. And you just wonder, like, are they happy functioning
Yeah.
semi-adults? Like, that to me is way more important than the degrees and the whole bit. So,
Yeah.
okay, so let's few last things
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So, a piece of advice for the students in general, and then maybe a piece of advice for parents, because that might be different, right?
Yeah.
As far as guiding their kids through the process.
Yeah. A piece of advice I have for the students is to, when you have the opportunity, to be aggressive. And the way I talk to my students is I tell them that you have to pretend like, I mean, use any sports analogy you want, but you're trailing in the fourth quarter near the end of the game because the odds are against you, and you have to do aggressive things. I'm not, not crazy things, but be aggressive with things, and you have to make yourself memorable. And you can't. Well, again, my field is for writing essays, and you can't write safe essays. You have to be aggressive because you have to give the admissions officer a reason to remember you, to fight for you, and to root for you. And so you have to be aggressive. And to that end, the second bit of advice for the students is you have to be willing to, as you said, tell a story that you can't find elsewhere on the application. And importantly, to use your own voice, to make it so that the way you sound comes through the page, comes through the paper, and
Yeah.
or I guess read it online. So you have to be aggressive, and you have to use your own voice, and you have to be brave to do that. So
Yeah.
that's for the students. And for the parents, and I think again, as you said, just like be as clear-eyed as possible about stuff. And also, as you said, like it's important to help the students, just support them as much as you can, right? And understand, as you said, that, and again, your listeners know this, that they're going through a really hard time. This is like really, and while we're at it, yeah, it's, I think, given all of social media and such, I think social media does make it harder for students than it was for us. Because
Yeah.
now they know immediately when someone got in some place, didn't get in some place. And I think the culture of competition and comparison is a lot more exhausting, right? A lot more stressing for students than it was for us.
Yeah, and I think parents can just constantly show up throughout your child's whole life. Like, yeah, I know you heard that. I know that was said. I know that's going on social media. But, my whole thing with my kids, it's not profound. It was like, do your best and
Yeah.
forget about all that. And
Yeah.
your best in this house, you're going to have a best in this class as far as mom and yeah, and your dad and I are concerned. And it was like, my daughter got a B minus in geometry, and I'm like, "Praise Jesus, we're done," you know?
Right. 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 Right.
That
Right.
was gonna be her personal best. She's a trauma therapist now. Like, she
Yeah.
wasn't a math kid, and she told herself she was bad at math, so she made herself worse. That's another story. But, like, I she she didn't have this standard that she had to have an A plus in everything,
Right.
and it really, if you show up like that as a parent over and over again through many things, your kid's going to be better for it. They're going to get
Yeah.
through this and get into the next chapter of their life just better. And they're going to fail. Like, you should
Right.
fail in life. If you
Right.
don't fail, to your point about, Stanford's looking for kids that failed. Like, a
Yeah.
fail story shows
Yes.
grit and guts and how did you handle, like, the quad god in the Olympics. Like, what I loved about, I didn't even know about that guy until the Olympics. But what I loved about him and what I'll remember is how he handled his failure and how he behaved. Like, that shows me like that kid is the real deal. Not that he
Yeah.
can do all these different quads that nobody else in the world can do. It was how he showed up when he failed on the biggest stage he could fail at. And so you need to fail. If you're not failing, you're not
Yep.
trying new stuff. And you learn from failure. Like, I'm not an essay specialist like you, but I think it would be totally cool to write about a failure and how you handled it and what that made you do. And maybe it led to some success a year later or something. Who knows, right?
Peg, you're spot on. That's exactly right. That is one of the best advice that I tell my students. Yeah, is absolutely. It's a lot more effective to write about failure than success. Absolutely. Because
Yeah.
yeah, like this
Yeah.
is because yeah, as they say, like what college is looking for too is how are they going to do when they get here, right? And if you can show, hey, actually, I'm pretty good at failing. I'm pretty good at like getting back up and being resilient. That goes a long way.
Yeah, and I think it does any kind of school. And then just to your comment about being aggressive, what I'm hearing you say, it might be another because aggressive is a it's a word, right? And
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think also what you're trying to say is with that is be authentic, be
Yes,
vulnerable. Like,
yes.
it's not a, I remember that, 3 paragraphs that what they made us do in high school. It's not because when people will tell me, I think, I don't know if you're the exception to the rule, and I don't know, but sometimes English teachers are not the best people to help with essays because they're thinking about the way that they teach, which is super valid, but not always the way you wanna write a college essay, and that's what I hear you say when you're saying aggressive, like, take a chance, be authentic, be
Yes.
vulnerable, but there's a way to be too vulnerable, like, I had a kid once who was like, well, I'm going to talk about how I used to steal all the time. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know if that's the best
Yeah.
thing, you know? So
Yeah.
that's where I personally think if you're going to spend money on this process, the essay is the one place you truly can be unique for any school to read. And all the stuff you were saying about an essay, you know, my husband handled that because he was the creative writer, but that's a very specific background he had. I could have never done that as a financial planner. I couldn't
Right.
have guided my kids to really write good essays from the writing standpoint to painting a picture and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and I think a lot
Yeah.
of parents, that's not their background, right? So it is
Yeah.
something, you know, if you want to talk about admissions chances, I honestly think it's more important than having perfect SAT, right?
Yeah.
Because a perfect
Yes.
SAT isn't going to get you in anywhere without the rest of the holistic package. So the essay piece, which this goes very nicely to talk about so you were a teacher for 25 years. Now,
Yes.
you know, recently left that world, and as I said, you have this very cool social media presence. So why don't you share, and we'll put it with the podcast as well, but what's your Instagram handle or whatever they
Yeah.
call that?
Yeah. My Instagram username is English Mark H. All one word, English Mark H. At English Mark H. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I promise all the listeners you're gonna love it. It's like
Uh,
there's just so much cool stuff. I love it. You know, there's so much stuff on social media that's not super positive, and I just
yeah.
love the way you do stuff. And it's just, yeah. So definitely check Mark out. The other thing, you have like an online learning community as well, right?
Yeah. So a few months ago, I started it because one of the things I started noticing in this cycle with working with students is they haven't really been taught a lot of skills. Like, if I may, again, with all due respect to all English classes in the world, but there's a big gap between what people have learned and what they need to know to be successful applying to college and succeeding while they're at college, or getting good grades while they're at college. And so I decided to start this online learning community where I teach them college essay tactics, where I teach them advanced writing skills, teach them storytelling, teach them grammar. And then I'm actually working on a class right now that is going to teach them how to write the analytical essays you talked about before with the thesis, body paragraphs, big sentences, and all that.
Yeah,
Because I just feel like sometimes, at least I'll say this, like, secondhand, but a lot of the students that I worked with in the fall and work with now, they're telling me that they were never actually taught how to write. And they
yeah,
never, Peg, I can't speak for you, but sixth grade to eighth grade for me, English wise, was decently miserable because it was a lot of grammar, a lot of fundamentals, and a lot of like learning actually how to write the language. And it was miserable at the time, but thank goodness,
yeah,
right? Thank
yeah.
goodness, because it changed everything.
I
I think,
remember I
yeah, go
remember
ahead.
before middle school doing that Warner's. I can still see that
Yes,
little
the
hardcover
Warren
book.
English grammar composition.
I hated that book, you know. But yeah, it was kind of
I
beat
have it right
into.
here. I
Yep,
have it right
yep,
here.
yep.
This is it.
I'm telling you. Yeah. So, well, that's great. What's that community called? What do you
That
call
was
it?
called the Writing Alliance on
Writing
school,
Alliance. Okay.
on
Okay.
SKOOL on schools, the Writing Alliance on
Yeah,
school.
I love the grammar part. I just love
Yes.
because it cracks me up. So many adults, and I read stuff. Sometimes I'll see a marquee. I'll see something that is on a store permanently, and I'm like, that's a grammatical error, and the person didn't know, you know. So it's kind of crazy. It's like second nature to me. To your point, I hated it
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
time, but now it's like having good table manners. Your parents beat
Yeah.
it into your head, and you
Yeah.
just know how to eat correctly because
Yeah.
they did that for so long.
Yeah.
Okay, well, any last parting thoughts before we sign off?
I mean, your listeners know this, Peg, but you guys do great work. I really appreciate the work you guys do. I love your mission, and I'm just thrilled to be on here.
Yeah, yeah, this was super, super fun. So, yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for taking the time, and good luck in your new chapter. You're not even a year in. It's so
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Thank you very
yeah.
much, Peg. Thank you.
All right, we'll see everybody next time. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you heard, please follow us, share the show, or maybe even send it to a parent or counselor who you think would enjoy it. I'm your host, Peg Keough, and I was joined by our guest, Mark Hernandez, a Stanford grad, veteran English teacher, high school teacher, and now a college essay consultant. Check him out on social media. This episode was produced by the wonderful Eileen Campbell, and we will see you back here next week.